want to get some coffee or something?
Can I get a cup of coffee? Black? Can't you see we talking? White?
Even little kids in Mexico drink coffee.
Well, I'm not a little kid in Mexico, okay?
That is the best coffee I've ever tasted.
A damn fine cup of coffee.
You want a cup of coffee?
No coffee.
Coffee drinker, huh?
Maybe we can grab some coffee?
Coffee, 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 coffee.
How you doing, fellas? That's not decaf, is it?
Viennese cinnamon.
Apparently, aliens like Viennese cinnamon. So,
I like strawberry ice cream and Temple Bells.
Good morning, everybody. It's Don Ecker and me, along with our panel of John, Das Wolfen, and Martina Costa Santana.
Hello.
And we are here to talk about weird shit. I guess we should say hello to everybody that's already here. Andy Morrow is here. The Dork Knight, Monkey Jeebus, Anima Confusa, Love of My Life, D. Bud Martin, Joseph Dredd, and Dragon Ruse. Today is going to be really interesting because we're going to take, Don wanted me to play the song, and legally we can't. The White Rabbit song by Jefferson Airplane. And absolutely, YouTube would gank us for that, like, back to 2 years ago. They would just punish the shit out of us. But the song is very fitting because we're going to be going down a rabbit hole today with, I think it's considered one of the first most watched snuff films in the history of cinema is The Murder of John F. Kennedy. And it's what it is. It's really hard to watch. We need to give you an absolute warning that even though we're not going to show the film for a little bit, the old Zapruder film, we're going to be talking about it. And Don's going to go into some stuff that, I don't know, Don, do you think it'll cause them to maybe have seizures?
Well, I can almost promise everybody that before the show is over, you're going to be more confused than you've ever been confused in your life.
Because he's going to go down a really dark rabbit hole of some interesting, controversial conspiracy theory shit. And some of it, now look, I fall into the category of there were people involved, and it wasn't just one man. I've always believed that. But am I as far as JFK, the movie goes? Maybe. But I think it was absolutely the mob. I think the CIA turned a blind eye.
This goes far above and beyond who killed JFK. Far above and beyond. Because during that period of time that all this controversy broke, we're talking circa 1988, 89, 90, and 91. Now, for anybody that thinks, and this was all incidentally wrapped up in the UFO field, for anyone to think that UFOs is only about shiny flying discs and maybe little green men, you're about to get an eye-opening awakening today.
Thank God I'm wearing a diaper just in case if I shit myself.
I'm wearing the brown pants.
Brown pants. That way you can make sure that it's covered. I know. As Deadpool would say, that guy gets it. That guy gets it.
This was so exciting today that I got my USB coffee warmer.
It's a USB hub and coffee warmer to set your mug on. I love that. I want one. How much was that? How much is set you back?
Santa Claus brought it.
Okay, so how much did it cost Vicky?
Her sister, Santa Claus.
Oh, her sister sent it. Oh, is Vicky going to get jealous over that?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Okay. But yeah, I really do want to get me one of those. I'm going to go look it up on Amazon today. But where are we going to start with this, Don? I mean, at some point, I guess we should show that video, but I don't know.
I think well, I'm just going to lay it out the way it happened with me personally.
Okay.
I was wrapped up in this from the get-go. Okay. And I ended up knowing, sometimes much to my chagrin, knowing some of these people more than I ever wanted to. Okay.
Oh man, I know that feeling.
It actually starts with the book Night Siege by J. Allen Hynek, Bob Pratt, and this other asshole who ended up being a total fraud. In 1984, 85, the book Night Siege came out. Now, at that time, I was going through physical rehab after I had been wounded during a SWAT team operation when I was a cop in 1986. Okay. And I was looking for things to keep me busy. My wife and I were going through a divorce after our little boy died in 84. And unfortunately, that's one of the things that often happens in a marriage when you have a child pass on. So, I was kind of banging off of walls looking for something to do. I ended up going back to college. I was taking some computer courses, and I always had an interest, and we had some news reports about some UFO sightings, and I had always had an interest in the field, especially since I had the sighting that I had in 1966. And I was very familiar, and I had read all the books that John Keel had written. Another series of books that I discovered then was by Major Donald Kehoe, USMC retired, who had headed up the NICAP organization. And I met the director for the state of Idaho for MUFON at that time, a gentleman by the name of Don Mason. And Don Mason and I became very good friends. And he appointed me, and I was a member of MUFON for 1 year. He appointed me the state section director for MUFON. Now, Mason was a real go-getter, okay? And he had a lot of really good ideas that he wanted to put into practice. One of them, and this was long before the current MUFON, I think they call it their STAR team, where it's a quick reaction group of investigators when they have some extraordinary UFO case pop up. But he wanted to do something very similar because at that time, in that part of the United States, and I'm talking primarily the states of Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, and Nevada, there were a lot of things going on. So Mason and I was visiting up at his house one day. And he said, I've got this idea, but I don't have a master list showing me who the state directors are for these states, Washington, Oregon, blah, blah, blah. So he said, what I'm going to do, I'm going to call Walt Andrus. who was the international director and the guy that actually began MUFON, okay, back in the 70s. And of course, at that time, I was not aware of the nefarious underpinnings of what Andrus and MUFON ended up doing. Walt Andrus and several other people, for example, a guy by the name of John Schuessler, who later became a MUFON international director after Andrus passed on, had all been part of the old APRO organization, the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, which was, in those days, the oldest civilian research organization around. They began back in the early 50s, about the same time as the Washington, D.C. overflights. And the people that founded that, and at that time were still running it, were a couple of people by the name of Jim and Coral Lorenzen. So Andrus and his cohorts ended up stealing from APRO their master membership list. And then they began soliciting all these people to become a part of MUFON, this new UFO organization. And later on, Coral Lorenzen, who was a fiery personality, would not have pissed on Walt Andrus if she saw him catch on fire. She loathed him so bad. And I of course, and I've mentioned this before, I had my own dealings with Walt Andrus, and that's I've already told that story, but that's a story for another day. So Mason called Andrus up, and he said, Walt, he said, look, this is what I want to do. He said, we've been having a lot of UFO sightings, and I might add some cattle mutilations up in this part of the country. And I want to get with these other state directors and form a fast response investigative team. Well, Andrus shut him down right on the spot, would not give him anything. Now, in hindsight, I am convinced the reason he did that was because he didn't want somebody else sticking him up the ass the way he stuck it up the ass of Jim and Coral Lorenzen. Okay, I think he was paranoid, but he wouldn't help him out. So that was my first real insight into how MUFON, at least at the higher echelon, operated at that time. So at any rate, I was getting very much into this. Now, also at that time, I had purchased my first computer system. It was a Tandy 1000EX computer, which at that time was a basic 8086 chip. I mean, today, you probably couldn't even get the damn thing plugged in. But back in those days, boy, I thought it was pretty hot. And I loved that little system. And by the time I got done, I had tricked it out. I had found a place that made, and it originally wasn't designed for this, but I found out a place that had a 400 megabyte hard drive that I could plug into it. I got a couple of other drives for it. One was a 360K drive, and the other was, I think, a 720 drive for the little 2.5-inch hard disks. So I was just smoothing right along. I screwed up by buying a telephone modem. The first one was a 300 baud. Now, if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, look it up because you're going to laugh. And finally, I went high tech and found a 1200 baud modem. Now, of course, when you have a computer and a modem, you got to have places to go with it. Unlike anything today. Today, we are light years beyond that technological peak back then. But one of the places you could go, well, were bulletin board services, BBSs, which by then were springing up everywhere. One of the first ones that I became a part of and later became an integral part of was the Paranet system, which was devoted strictly toward UFOs and paranormal topics. And that ended up spanning the globe, literally. So I'm tooling along, and then somebody said, well, have you checked out CompuServe? Well, I didn't know what CompuServe was, but it ended up being a pay-as-you-go computer service, okay? Somewhat like what the internet is today, but actually much more, in those times, it was, compared to today, very primitive, but it was high-tech then. So I go on CompuServe at $6.40 an hour with a 300 baud modem, okay? And I discovered something called the Issues Forum. And in there were people talking about UFO cases, cattle mutilations, and other sundry items. Now, I read, and I'll never forget, it was Christmas 1987. Christmas, okay? I'm at home with my little 1000 Tandy EX. I'm on CompuServe. I'm in the Issues Forum. And a guy by the name of Jim Spicer, who was the founder of the Paranet system, and I got to know Jim pretty damn well later on, had just uploaded a file that had been placed on the Paranet BBS services from a guy by the name of John Lear. Okay. Now, that's a name today that should be very familiar to everybody. John Lear's father had been William Lear, who was the founder of Lear Sigler Corporation and the guy that did the Lear jet. John, his son, had been a commercial airline pilot, okay, during the Southeast Asian War Games, or in other words, the Vietnam War. He had worked under contract with the CIA, flying, aircraft in and out, carrying all sorts of cargo.
So he's part of Air America.
You may remember the movie Air America. Yes.
Sorry.
Yes. That was John Lear, what he was doing. So this document that Lear had sent to Jim Spicer at Paranet, Spicer had put up on the Issues Forum, and with a little bit of a preamble, I read this and I said, damn, this sounds interesting, because I didn't know at the time who John Lear was. Well, Lear was an accomplished pilot, of course, the son of Bill Lear, had flown in Southeast Asia, had done all these things, held every FAA certificate that was available, had won all kinds of awards and other goodies. And one of the guys he had flown with and knew from Southeast Asia had gotten in touch with him and told him about an amazing story that happened in the United Kingdom, the UK, okay, at a place called Bentwaters, which ended up being the infamous Christmas 1980 UFO sighting over there, where UFOs were sighted, allegedly landing in the forest right outside of the air base, which was a joint USAF RAF air base that housed, by the way, tactical nuclear weapons. Because if you're not up on your history, at that time, Europe, primarily Poland and several other Eastern European countries, were on the verge of a revolution. You may remember a guy by the name of Lech Walesa, I believe it was, who later became the president of Poland after they overthrew the communist yoke. But the Russians were getting a little antsy about this. Also, the Russians had invaded Afghanistan. Now, Jimmy Carter was the president of the USA then, a completely ineffectual flop as a president. His response to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan was to pull our Olympic teams out of the Olympics. I mean, we're talking hardball stuff there. But Bentwaters was on the front line. Had there been a war breakout, those tactical nuclear weapons were there for that very purpose. But allegedly, these UFOs overflew the Bentwaters site. They interfered with those weapons. I mean, military personnel saw this, and when I say interfere, they came in over the storage depot where the nukes were. They shined beams and rays into it. If you know anything about UFO incursions into ICBM bases here in the United States, you will recall that they actually knocked those nukes offline.
Yep.
And some of them were so badly damaged, they had to be replaced by whatever it was the UFOs did. So we're talking some very, very serious business here. Well, Lear was, as he later told me, was blown away by what his buddy had told him. So I'm reading this document that had been uploaded from Paranet to CompuServe. And I got to tell you, I was not only shocked at the audaciousness of what Lear said, but the implications that Lear was maintaining in this document. Now, this guy was not just any Tom, Dick, or Harry off the street. He came from an extraordinarily prestigious family. He was an accomplished professional pilot in his own right. And he had a name that at that time basically meant something. So I'm reading this document, and the things in there he alleged were, number one, that these extraterrestrial beings had been in contact with the federal government, that these extraterrestrial beings had formed a secret treaty with the federal government, that in exchange for allowing the aliens to abduct human beings and cattle, the cattle mutilations, that they would exchange technology with the federal government. Lear alleged that they had given the federal government a device that would allow them to peer into the past. In other words, basically a visual time machine that would allow the government or whomever had the device to look at historical events And the one that Lear mentioned was the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Okay? Now, this was some pretty heady stuff. And I got to say, for whatever reason, I got outraged by this. Okay? I mean, what this guy was claiming was counter to everything that at that time I thought I knew. All right. So I said to myself, I said, self, you're going to track this guy down and call him up and have a chat with him. Well, about a week, 2 weeks later, after Christmas, after the New Year's, I did that very thing. I tracked Lear down. He was living in Las Vegas at the time. Later, I was to visit him down there. Beautiful house he had. It was actually a freaking mansion. And that part is going to figure into this story a bit because everybody thought John Lear was loaded, money coming out his ears. But that could not be further from the truth. So I got his phone number. I called him up and I introduced myself, told him who I was. I had not yet started working with UFO magazine, but I had written by then, or was in the process of writing an article that I ultimately sent down to UFO. Now, UFO at that time was in downtown LA. All right. Actually, at a place called Pickford Street. So Lear and I talked for about 3.5 hours. Now, I was becoming very aware of what was happening in the UFO field. I had already started haunting libraries and bookstores. For any of you that had heard me talk about that time period before, you will recall I said that for about 6 months before I decided that I wanted to become really involved, I went on an extensive data research program to find out exactly what the hell I was getting into. And then in the midst of all this, Don Mason, the director of MUFON for Idaho, called me up one day. And he said, hey, he said, I just got a report. He said, you're an ex-cop. He said, this is actually right up your alleyway. He said, when you get a chance, drop by because I want to talk to you about this. And I said, well, what is it? And he said, well, I prefer not to go into it over the phone. Well, that kicked up my red flags. And I'm thinking, what the hell could this be? Well, that ended up being the discovery of a body over near Jerome, Idaho, that was discovered in the woods where this man had been mutilated like a cow. Okay. And when I say that, what I'm referring to is the removal of an eye, the anus being cored out, some other mutilations that, well, I don't want to go into it because it is graphic. But that really caused me to sit up. And if I'm honest, and I always try to be honest, I got a little paranoid about that. So anyway, more about that in a minute. But about a week after Lear and I had that monumental 3.5-hour phone chat, a UPS truck pulls up in front of my townhouse. And a guy came up, knocked on the door. I went to the door, and it was a delivery from John Lear. He didn't even tell me he was going to do this, but it was damn near a 10-pound package of basically Xeroxes of all his research, including a couple of VCR tapes. Well, I signed for it, thanked the guy, brought it inside, opened it up, started going through it. And when I say it was his research, my God, the stuff in there practically blew my mind. So I called him up. Number one, I wanted to thank him for sending that. I didn't expect it. Excuse me. And then I asked him about what some of this other stuff was. One of the items was a videotape of Japanese astronomers that had been observing the moon. Okay, they videotaped this while they were doing it. And across the surface of the moon, this round shadow flew across the moon's surface. And that was kind of shocking. And I asked John about that. He said, well, you know, he said the aliens have bases up there. Oh, okay. So anyway, I really then jumped into this business. Now, I was doing, like I said, a lot of research. When this human mutilation popped up, I tracked down, because somebody I thought might be able to help me with this was an author researcher by the name of John Keel. And that was my first contact with Keel. John, of course, well-known paranormal writer, researcher, 410, okay? And I had an extensive, I told him who I was, what I was doing, and had an extensive chat with him. And I said, John, I said, this is what just basically popped up on my radar up here in Idaho. Have you ever encountered anything like this before? And he said, oh yeah. He said, I have. And then we got off into the bushes with some of his research, which included his investigation into West Virginia, the infamous Mothman prophecies, and a bunch of other stuff. Oh my God, he was down the rabbit hole beyond where you would ever believe. But I said, well, yeah, that's all interesting. His idea of the quote unquote ultra terrestrials, what they were doing with the blood they were taking from animals and apparently humans, and what they were doing with the flesh. And he was convinced they were using that material to make cryptid creatures like the Men in Black. And I got to take a break here, Gary. Get any questions or anything?
No, I just have to address some things in the chat. I didn't want to interrupt you, man, because you were on a roll. And I'm like, this is fascinating shit. Some of this I've never heard before. Some of the stuff about Lear I'd heard. But first of all, I want to thank Six for her $1.49 super sticker. I'm assuming that it is some kind of breaking or breaching the back door.
Well, there
reference.
There are two of them. First, this one of 0.99, and then the one of the 149.
And I can't see them. What are they?
Yeah, the first one is poo, and the other looks like an ass. So
yeah, okay. So it's backdoor. So for your thank you video, you get one of the wonderful backdoor references here. Where? There you go.
Open your back door, baby. Loosen your hinges, I'll show you my key.
Front door team and back door team.
2 videos. There we go. Thank you very much. Somebody else I saw had we had a lot of comments. We had a lot of comments. So I need to go to the starred one, because I'm hoping all of them got starred. Let's see. First of all, Dork Knight, good luck with your procedure today, man. Hope everything comes out well. Neck surgery is always nervous, but be calm. You're in good hands. Be thinking about you all day, buddy. Let's see. Then we got Monkey Jeebus with, I'm so grateful to have his name back from Krampus. UFO Con in Pasadena in March. You doing it, Dawn?
Wasn't invited.
Wasn't invited. Joseph Dredd, good morning to you. Good morning to everybody. It's like a lot of people dropped in. Let's see. Anyone else get the American Community Survey for the U.S. Census Bureau? I didn't.
No.
70s rock fan, Canadian $5 from Alberta, Canada. Good morning, friends. Another fascinating show. Many thanks. Thank you, sir. I appreciate having you as a friend, dude. You are awesome.
That's money that smells like maple syrup.
I like that idea. Tandy was actually a leather company. I saw that. That's interesting. Different Tandy, wasn't it? Yes. Yeah.
Tandy was the brand name of Radio Shack's computer line.
Right. Well, Tandy. Yeah, I know. Anybody that was a nerd knows what Tandy is. But anyway, thank you, Monkey Jeebus, for mixing your metaphors. That's awesome. Let's see, Tandy was actually a leather company. That's just goofy. You think am I going to have to do all these? Okay. Jolly Old England. Good morning, Chris. Hope you had a good show yesterday. And a very good morning to the great Don Ecker from 70s Rock Fan, our good friend Brian. So thanks a lot, guys. It's good to see all of you. I saw some people slipped in, so I want to go through the names because I know I ended on Enema. So D. Bud Martin, Joseph Dredd, Dragon Ruse, John Ostains, Keely Chow, Lord Thoth, all hail Lord Thoth, Real Wade Nation, of course, the lovely Six, That 70s Rock Fan, Christopher Moonlight Productions, and of course, the wonderful Peter Vickman fan site is here. Thanks for coming in, guys, dropping in to see us. We almost got the whole crew. Normally we're between 20 and 30. I think some people are slacking this morning, Don. I really do. Not joining on our show. They're scared of John F. Kennedy stories.
And Don, I'm sorry that I jumped out there and interrupted you. I just got excited. It was something that I knew.
No, that's cool. That's cool.
What is this? John Osteen asked, it's hard to overestimate, or as George W. Bush would say, overestimate how much of a modern ufology and pop culture about it all stems from these days in the 80s with its amazing stories and characters. There's something I do want to bring up because in the middle of all this is a documentary that Rod Serling was the announcer on, the narrator. And it's called UFOs, It Has Begun. Came out in 1979. And, oh, wait, hold on. We got Joe's Atmosphere for $1.99. Morning, fellas. Don't get abducted. Technically, I have been abducted. It's legal stuff. My dad. My mom. Anyway, for you, sir, you are going to get this one because I got to tell you, man.
Well, whatever helps you sleep at night, bitch.
There you go, Joe. That's for you. Any more comments here? I need to look, see if we're missing anything. I think we're caught up. Thandie Newton, diversify. Spock would suggest having the adrenal gland removed. So I do want to talk about, and thank you, Joe, for your $1.99 super sticker or super chat.
Can I ask a question, Gary?
Yeah.
Why $1.99 and not $2?
I don't know. They do that. Some of these super, I think they offer that. It's just really weird the way they set up the super stickers and super chats. So not sure. I got to be honest with you. I have no idea. I see it all the time.
I found that strange is all.
Yeah, I see it all the time, and I really have no answer. I don't know why it's set up that way. So Zax is here too. Good morning, Zax. How you doing, Kyle? So UFOs, It Has Begun was a 1979 documentary that was originally
Robert Emmenegger was the guy.
Yeah. He was supposed to be given access to 16 millimeter footage shot by the military. The Department of Defense had access to or control over. And he was told he was getting full access to this film that showed a close encounter that was very similar to that of what happened in the movie Close Encounter.
Landing.
Yeah, a landing.
A landing on an Air Force base.
And communication.
The base commander allegedly coming out to meet the alien representatives that were allegedly filmed coming down off the craft.
Right. And
by the way, this was the same bullshit shtick that the Air Force later pulled on Linda Moulton Howe in '84. When Linda Howe had signed a contract with HBO to do a UFO killer documentary where an Air Force representative, a guy that today you should recognize his name, Richard Doty, who had been an AFOSI agent, later busted out of the AFOSI and placed into food services, okay, to finish his 20-year tour with the Air Force. Now, look, I was a GI. I served in the military, the Army. I was involved in intelligence matters. You were in the Army as a combat medic. If you get busted out of an organization like that, that was some kind of a major foul up, all right? Never did hear what caused that. And it's something that Doty has never really wanted to talk about. But he's been one of those nefarious characters that have been around for a long time, stirring the bullshit. Okay, rant off.
Yeah, there's some stuff that talks about Richard Doty from Mirage Men to Unacknowledged are two that I've seen. But anyway, oh, wait, Anima has a super chat. What is this? Europe does it correctly, LOL. Oh, it's $2 euro or €2. Sweetheart, I wish there was a reject button so I could send that back to you. But instead, let me here. I give you this one, Anima.
You believe any of this voodoo bullshit, Blair? Charles, chariots of the gods, man. They practically own South America. I mean, they taught the Incas everything they know.
There you go. So, getting back into this, because we get, I know this is somehow going to head towards the Kennedy assassination. So, I want you to pick up where you left off and let's keep going on this because I'm fascinated by this. I don't know about you guys, but this is my favorite episode so far that we've done.
So anyway, here I am talking to John Keel, and I got to tell you, I began then at that time doing what turned into a Oops, that's Vicky.
Oh, is Vicky cooking?
Yeah,
I heard some banging.
Yeah. She's having her bowl of cereal right now. So anyway, I began what turned into a 3-year research effort into cracking this human mutilation aspect of the UFO phenomenon. Now, you're aware that back in 81, 82, as a criminal investigator, I investigated several cattle mutilations. And at that time, of course, it was not on my purview that this might have extended over into the human side of things.
Right.
But apparently it did. Now, the whole human mute thing is something else. But I wrote a paper on what I had done up to that point and gave it to Paranet. It's now you can probably find it buried somewhere out on the web. My paper on the human mute thing. But I talked to John Lear then. Now, look, Lear at that point struck me as just like anybody else. This was long before John ended up going deep into the rabbit hole. But he had invited me to come down to Vegas. He was giving a talk to the former intelligence officers. It's an organization like a veterans organization that he was somehow affiliated with. He may have been a member. I don't recall anymore. I mean, my God, this is well over 30 years ago. But at any rate, he said, come on down. He said, I can recommend a couple of places. He said, great to stay at. He said, you can come over here to the house then. We'll have a drink. We'll sit down. We can talk. And I said, yeah, cool. That sounds great. So I got a ticket. I bought a ticket and ended up flying down to Las Vegas and got a room and then got a cab. Went out to where Lear was living, his home. Went down into his basement. He had his basement was his office. Okay?
I don't know, man. These kinds of stories lead to some dark places when you end up in somebody's basement.
Yeah, well, he brought out his Thompson submachine gun and showed me. He had a Class 3 firearms license. He said, yeah, I got a Tommy gun. He brings his damn thing out, a 1928 model with the big drum. Who the hell are you going to shoot with that? But anyway, he had a 45 in a shoulder holster hanging over his desk chair. All right. His wall was covered with photographs from all over the globe. And I got some pictures of some of those photographs. One was with G. Gordon Liddy, him and Lear together. Now, does everybody know or remember who G. Gordon Liddy was?
I used to listen to his radio show, man.
Well, on the bottom of this picture, he said, John, this is what he wrote on the picture. John, I never told him a goddamn thing. And of course, he was referring to the Watergate business. He was part of the plumbers team at the Watergate. So he did his time. Okay. He'd rather go to jail than rat out anybody. He was hardcore. So anyway, I'm looking at all this stuff. And of course, what I really wanted to get into was the UFO stuff. Then I got hit with some of his stories. And one involved the Dulce base shootout, which is an infamous, dark story that supposedly down in Dulce, New Mexico, there is an underground facility that was jointly run by the USG and the military and the alien presence. And supposedly, there were certain areas within this base where the aliens were, where the military could not go in there with firearms. This is what I was told at the time. And anyway, these military were allegedly special forces, airborne, Green Beret, had gone into this area with loaded firearms. The aliens attempted to stop them. It broke down into an armed conflict where there were shots exchanged and allegedly both aliens and U.S. military personnel died. Hang on. You're going to have to take that. So anyway, I didn't know what the hell to think. And I'm talking to Lear about this, and I said, where did you get this information? And he was very coy, wouldn't tell me. Then he said, but that's nothing. You got to see this. And he took me over to his TV set. He had a VCR set up. And he said, watch this. And I said, what is it? He said, it's the Zapruder film. And I said, the JFK assassination? He said, oh, yeah. And I said, okay, what about it? He said, who do you think shot JFK? And I said, a sniper. He said, nope. The driver shot JFK. And I said, the driver of who? His limousine. Just watch it. So I looked at this video. He hit play, and it's Kennedy and Mrs. Kennedy and Governor Conley, and then and his wife, and then up front, the two Secret Service agents. One was driving, a guy that I later found out was named William Greer, and the Secret Service agent passenger, a guy by the name of Roy Kellerman. So I'm watching this go down the street. Suddenly, for literally, guys, just a split second, it looks like the driver moved his hands on the steering wheel, and then what appeared to be, and it looked just like a model 1911 45 automatic that was pointed back to the rear toward Kennedy, and then it was gone. And that's exactly when Kennedy grabbed his throat. You remember that sequence where he got apparently shot? And
he's on one side of the sign. He's fine. He goes behind the sign, and when he comes out, his hands are here.
Right.
And a lot of people don't know this.
His head
explodes. Yep.
Okay.
But a lot of people don't know this. I want to add this in here. What got him killed was the fact that a lot of people don't know he had spinal issues, and he had a back brace on, and it made it impossible for him to move downward. He was stuck in an upright position because of the brace. And so he was doomed.
And that headshot was the coup de grace.
Yeah, and they try to say that it was from behind, but the way his head moved, and I agree with the JFK assessment, yes, it's true that bullets, high velocity bullets, have a tendency of making a small entry and then with the gas causing a bigger injury on the exit wound. But the fact is, the way that flap went and the way his head jerked, it just seemed, contrary to what they were trying to say happened.
But when we're talking about going down the rabbit hole, okay. Yes. Now, this is where the rabbit hole opens up, because when I had been talking to Keel previously to visiting Vegas, John Keel told me that he said, well, basically, words to the effect of, do you know what one of the most deadly conspiracies is? And I said, what do you mean deadly? Well, more people have died that have been associated with investigating it than any other, conspiracy. And I said, no, what? He said, JFK, the Kennedy assassination. And at that time, if I remember correctly, Keel told me that close to 200 people died mysteriously that were affiliated with investigating the JFK assassination. Now, this would have been in 88, all right? 88, which was, well, Kennedy was killed in 63. So 83 would have been 20 years, another, at that time, 25 years after the murder. So I'm looking at this video and I'm not sure what the hell I'm thinking, because, well, you've heard that old adage, don't believe your lying eyes. So I asked him to run it again, and he did. And I said, Jesus, John, where did you get this? And once again, he got coy. Well, I thought to myself, buddy, this is something I am definitely going to investigate. And I found out where it came from and the provenance of it. And I'll just say this name right now, but I'll go back to him. Lars Hansen was the guy, okay? Now, I didn't know Hansen then, but later I got to know him very well. And I got all the inside and outside of this. But Lear went to that former intelligence agency association's dinner. He spoke. He showed this video. And then this was the part that I could not believe. All right. I couldn't believe it. I witnessed it. I was right there. I heard him ask the question. I saw the people raise their hand. And you're probably thinking, now, what the hell is he talking about? When he ran that a couple of times so everybody could see it, he then stood up there and said, if you would have been in service then and had been ordered to be a part of this assassination, how many of you would have responded positively? 4 freaking people raised their hands. One of them was a woman. Okay. Right there, buddy. The Constitution went right out the motherfucking window. Right there. So, I started my investigation and on where the provenance of this thing. And finally, I found out it came from a guy by the name of Lars Hansen. Now,
I'm not sure who is Lars Hansen. I know an actor.
I'm going to tell you right now.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you right now.
Oh, we got top of the hour. Let me do our little. This is normally where our commercial break would be. So let me. I'm going to redub this too, just for us. But here you go.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to the middle of the film.
There we go. We're back from our commercial break. Coming soon. I'm hopefully going to launch this with KGRA next week. See if we can do it with this show on Wednesday. Launch it with that. What do you think of that?
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, fuck YouTube. Anyway, even though I know you guys are going to still enjoy us on YouTube, I'm done worrying about them ganking us. I'm sick of it over anything. I mean, once again, you wanted to play White Rabbit. You know? Can't do it because YouTube would shut us down.
And Grace Slick would have done us proud.
Yep. And at least you know if we get pulled off the air from YouTube, you know where to find us. So KGRA, download the app and you can still watch and listen.
Well, let me get back to this story because we only got an hour and this is a hell of a story.
All right. And you are going to get to who Lars is because I'm very curious who the fuck this dude is.
That's what I was starting to do before we got interrupted.
Oh, by the middle of our show? Yeah, okay, Don.
Okay. Or you can take it away if you want, Gary.
No, fuck no. I don't know what's good. Dude, you lived a horrifying life. I do not want to fucking dig into that hole. I'm afraid I wouldn't come out. I'd be traumatized by some of the shit that happened to you, dude. No fucking way.
Well, Lars Hansen had been formerly a deputy sheriff he was very left tilting and an activist. All right. And some of his resume included going down to Nicaragua and reporting on the revolution down there. Okay, fighting the nefarious CIA surrogates, okay, by the true blue Sandinista freedom fighters, Daniel Ortega. It's some names from the past, okay, and I got to tell you, that part didn't sit well with me, all right, but be that as it may, he had never served in the armed forces, but had traveled to all these places. As a matter of fact, you ready for this? He had met in Iraq our old buddy Saddam Hussein. All right. When we were having our problem, do you remember when an Iraqi jet shot the shit out of one of our naval vessels? Okay.
Yep.
Oh yeah. Well, they were at that time. Iraq was our buddy because Iraq was bombing the shit out of Iran. They had a hell of a war going on with Iran then. You got to keep all this stuff in mind to see where all of this is starting to gel. So I looked at him and I said, okay, but JFK, what the hell is this? He said, you know that there was a definite conspiracy to murder Kennedy, right? And I said, well, yeah. I said, I have no doubt of that. He said, they were going to kill Kennedy because of a couple of things. He said, you know who Allen Dulles was, right? And I said, of course I knew who Allen Dulles was. All right, former director of CIA. And his brother, okay, they were Cold War warriors going way back all the way to World War II. Well, Kennedy threatened to smash the CIA into 1,000 pieces. And I said, yeah, that's true. He did. And he was going to fiddle around with the federal bank, okay? Put us back on the gold standard, supposedly. Well, he had to go. And let us not forget the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. The Russians had sent nuclear ICBMs into Cuba. They were preparing launch platforms when we discovered what they were doing, which caused the entire Cuban Missile Crisis. And at that time, and I got this part from several former Air Force guys I knew who had been career guys that had served over 20 years. The Joint Chiefs of Staff at that time, okay, threatened to resign in mass because Kennedy had sat on this for over a week before he went public. They felt for sure that he should have responded well before that, and they were putting all kinds of pressure on the president to do something, because if the Russians lit the candle on those nukes, they could have taken out the entire eastern seaboard. Now, I can remember that very well because my dad at that time was in the active reserves. He had been called up and they were threatening an invasion of Cuba. Okay. I think it was the 82nd were airborne, were being prepared to drop into Cuba. And as it was, all right, we had a U-2 aircraft, a reconnaissance spy airplane You've heard of the U-2. The Russians shot one down. We had one lost when it was overflying Cuba trying to take photos. Okay. So things were very, very tense. We had put a naval blockade around Cuba. And I mean, at the time, literally, everybody thought, this is it. We're going to war. Well, thank God that never happened. But, okay, here's Lars Hansen telling me, he said, this is why Kennedy got whacked. Okay. Well, Lars, what's that have to do with the driver? He said, and he was working with two other guys up in Northern California. David Perry was one guy. I can't recall the other guy's name. And he said, we went out, tracked down a fourth video copy of the Zapruder film. We brought it back to a lab where, now the Zapruder film originally was in Keller. All right. We washed all the Keller out of it to enhance the contrast of this video. And that's when the gun showed up. Well, I don't know about you guys, but anybody that's ever fired a .45 automatic pistol, and I fired thousands and thousands of rounds through a 1911, both in the military, when I was a cop, because when I worked undercover for almost 2 years. I carried two .45s then, and I had one as a civilian, and I was always going out to the range with that thing. You will know that a .45 has extensive muzzle blast, and it has a very noticeable recoil when the round is fired. None of that was demonstrated in that video. And I told Lars, I said, well, if that's true, Lars, that he fired a .45 into Kennedy, okay, I didn't see any muzzle blast. I didn't see any recoil. But I said, okay, I'm going to keep my mind a little bit open on this. So, how did John Lear get it? Now, this is where Lear's financial situation comes into the picture. Lars told me that after they saw that video, which now remember is a 5th generation copy, okay, it's now a 5th. He said, I was convinced that John Lear was heir to the Lear fortune. I didn't know at the time that he wasn't. And that's true. John Lear had been disinherited by his father, William Lear. They had some kind of a big falling out. And I won't say that Bill Lear was maybe this side of crazy. But, okay. And John, maybe this much on the side of crazy. But these two forces came together and they didn't mesh. Now, John later on, after his old man passed on, had a very warm relationship with his mom. And when he got into trouble, mom would come through for him. All right. But Lars went down there thinking that Lear had vast pockets and he wanted to see if he would finance additional research on this, not knowing that that wasn't in the purview. But Lars gave him a copy of this video with the caveat that you do not release this to anybody. Well, now this is where John Lear begins to fracture. The first thing he did was to show anybody that he thought would be interested a copy of this video. Then he, because of his name, was on the UFO speaking tour, speaking all across the country, including out here on the West Coast. And what's one of the things that he would use as a draw? This freaking video, okay? This video. Then he did something that caused the entire freaking UFO field to go further asunder, because remember, his original document, the Lear document, which you can probably still, I'm sure, find it on the internet, okay, that he sent to Paranet and then CompuServe, that had created the first earthquakes in the UFO field, because people began arguing, various factions within the field, that John Lear is right. No, John Lear's nuts. John Lear's got the truth. No, John Lear's a crackpot. Okay. Well, then this video began the rounds, and Lear sent it to a guy by the name of Milton William Cooper. Okay. Bill Cooper, who first surfaced on Paranet in the Fountain Hills, Arizona Paranet Alpha back in July of 1988. Now, a couple other names that I hadn't mentioned yet, all right, had been out there very prominently. One name was Bill Moore. Okay, Bill Moore wrote the original book on the Roswell incident. The Roswell incident, okay, back in around 81. Now, a lot of that was based on an intelligence officer who at the time, at the 509th, which was the bomber wing that dropped the 2 nuclear bombs on the Japanese that ended World War II, the intelligence officer was a guy by the name of Jesse Marcel. Now, Major Marcel, later when he retired, was a lieutenant colonel. Major Marcel had gone finally public with, among the first to interview him, was longtime researcher and nuclear physicist Stanton Friedman. All right. Stanton Friedman, one of the premier Roswell investigators. There were actually about 4. There was Friedman, there was Bill Moore, there was Kevin Randall, and Don Schmidt. And none of them, incidentally, liked each other, which will tell you a lot about the UFO field, right? But Jesse Marcel had been interviewed several times before his demise in about 1986. And he went on record describing the debris that he and a fellow officer, who later turned out to be a counterintelligence corps guy by the name of Sheridan Cavett, who incidentally denied everything until the day he died. All right. He was a good soldier, a good troop. He denied everything. Oh, no. We found a balloon out there. Well, bullshit balloon. All right. The debris field, according to Marcel, covered about 3/4 of a mile. All right. And this stuff, they had gone out after the rancher, a guy by the
Mac
name
Brazel.
of Bill. Yes. And his son, Bill Brazel, had reported something had crashed out there. You see, around the 4th of July, there was a hell of a thunderstorm out there. And this thunderstorm, the next day, Brazel was trying to run some sheep through there, and they came to this debris field, and the sheep refused to cross it. So he went into town to the sheriff's office and reported this. They thought it was just a regular aircraft that came down. They didn't know what it was. So they contacted the 509th, and Marcel and Cabot were sent out there to find out what it was. Now, Marcel claimed that this material was basically otherworldly. They found material that was, as he described it, thinner than the aluminum foil on a package of cigarettes. They couldn't bend it. They couldn't dent it with a hammer. I mean, it was just really weird stuff. Then they found other material that they could wrap up like a piece of paper, and when you released it, it would immediately go back to its original form. Well, Marcel ended up taking about a shoebox full of this stuff home to show his wife and little boy. His little boy at that time was Jesse Marcel Jr., who later grew up to become a physician and a brigadier general in the Air Guard. Okay, I knew the guy. As a matter of fact, he was one of the guys that I took with me down to Disney in January of '95 for that other weird thing that happened down at Orlando, Florida. But at any rate, we'll get back to that at another time. So this guy, okay, came out of the ether by the name of Bill Cooper, William Cooper. Now, Cooper, I heard something bleeding in there. Cooper had sent a note to Jim Spicer at the Paranet Alpha site, okay, the BBS, stating that in the mid-'60s, he had been a crewman on board a diesel submarine, okay, that the Navy were still using. I think it might have been a training vessel because we had really gone all nuke by then. But while they were out on this voyage, Cooper claimed he was a lookout on the conning tower of this submarine when suddenly this gigantic thing came out of the ocean's water that Cooper claimed was roughly the size of an aircraft carrier. And that's pretty big, okay? That flew up into the sky, disappeared beyond the clouds, and a little bit later came tumbling back down, entered the water, and disappeared. All right? But that was only the beginning of this guy. All right? Now, at first, Spicer was very complimentary about Cooper coming forward, a former military guy coming forward, reporting on a stupendous UFO event. But that was only the beginning, because as more time went by, this story grew and geometrically morphed into an all-encompassing cosmic conspiracy, including the JFK assassination. And how did that happen? Well, initially, Bill Cooper claimed that everything that William Moore and Jamie Chandra, his writing partner then, had reported on about the MJ-12 document was true. Now, I hadn't mentioned MJ-12, but MJ-12 was purportedly a document that Bill Moore presented to the UFO community back in the early 80s that was alleged to have been a briefing document for the then incoming Dwight David Eisenhower administration in late 1952. Eisenhower took the Oval Office in January of 53. But this briefing was allegedly all about what happened at Roswell. And the MJ-12 team were some of the top scientific and military names in the entire globe back in those days. Now, MJ-12 has always been a contentious document. Stanton Friedman was convinced it was real. Many others think it was a provocation. It wasn't real. And even today, all right, and MJ-12 could rate a show just on itself, all the ins and outs of that. But initially, Bill Cooper said, Bill Moore is 100%, 150% correct. But a bit later, Cooper began to change his story about that. Now, this was one thing about this guy, Bill Cooper, that I tracked and ended up writing a 2-part expose on him. And boy, did that give me years of grief after that. And a couple of radio shows that I did about this guy in his own voice, I might add. And that is in itself another rabbit hole to go down, but I'm not going to go there today. So anyway, as a little bit of time went on, this stuff coalesced more and more into this all-encompassing conspiracy. Now, when John Lear sent that video to Bill Cooper, suddenly Cooper came out of the woodwork saying, oh my God, I've been looking for this for years. Oh my God, this is fantastic. This proves what I've been saying. Well, what the hell was he saying? That back in the very early 70s, he was part of the Pacific Command Naval, Pacific Command's briefing staff. And he was, at the time, he was a chief petty officer. So if he would have even been a part of that, what that would have meant was he was the guy that carried the empty coffee pots out, brought the full coffee pots back in, and emptied the ashtrays. Because back in those days, everybody smoked. But he claimed to be privy to some of the most top secret information then available anywhere on planet Earth. And it was pure, absolute bullshit. When I did my investigation and expose on him, among other people that I called up to interview was the Navy itself. And there would have been no way, unless, okay, there would have been imminent war, that this guy could have been anywhere close to that. But he had claimed he would go in to the files where all this top secret information was and basically photocopy this stuff and then walk out with this information in his lunch bucket, his lunch pail. Now, when I heard that, now I have my own experience with military intelligence. It just sounded like the purest bullshit to me. So I began examining some of the stuff that he was saying much more closely and in fine detail. And one of the things that I zeroed in on was one of his stories involving allegedly a grounded ET that went by the name of Kryll, Cryll, okay? That's how it was originally spelled. And Cooper began claiming he had read about this in the files. Well, that would have been impossible because basically John Lear and another guy who at the time was still an active duty NCO in the Air Force by the name of John Grace had written a book. And for you guys on your computer right now, you can check it out on the internet. Wrote a book called The Matrix, Matrix, The Matrix by John Grace. Now, this was another book that was a claptrap of basically every conspiracy theory in the sun. But in that book, they talked about a case from the late 1950s that, by the way, the Navy did investigate. A woman, and I don't recall anymore what her name was, had claimed and contacted the Navy that she had been in telepathic communication with an ET who was called Krill. All right. But that was the only reference to Krill anywhere in the universe until John Grace and John Lear added this to the book, The Matrix. Now, in the book, the name Krill was spelled Krill. Now, Gary, do you remember what I said before we started? We were going to be going down a rabbit hole.
Oh, yeah.
Was I lying?
No, I'm just worried that I should have brought a headlamp because it's getting dark.
Well, let me stop
John,
briefly.
you're muted.
You got any
John.
questions or anything?
No, I'm engaged in this so far. Everybody's like, asking if there's going to be an after show, and I said there'll be a short one because I'm sure they've got some questions for you.
Well, anyway, to get back to this, somewhere along the line, Bill Cooper added, or was it John Lear? I think it was John Lear. OH to the Krill. In other words, OH Krill, Krill. And Cooper claimed that, oh, yeah, I read about that in the Navy files. It stood for Original Hostage Krill. Okay, where he took this, appropriated this story into his overall gestalt of bullshit. Okay, and he ended up being interviewed on television about this down in Las Vegas. Now, at that time, him and John Lear, I won't say they were buddy-buddy, but they were traveling in some of the same circles. And later, this whole coterie, including me, okay, because of my human mutilation research I was then in the middle of, were invited to speak at the MUFON International Symposium the following July in 1989. And that is another story in and of itself, which included MUFON, Walt Andrus, the MUFON Board of Directors, Las Vegas itself, several casinos. I mean, Jesus Christ. It my head spins when I think too much about this. But anyway, to get back to the Krill story. So Lear was very cognizant and knew a lot of television producers. I mean, his wife, Lear's wife, was basically a casting agent for media, okay, for movies and what have you. So he knew all these people. Everybody by then knew about Lear's UFO fascination, so he was often being interviewed. So One of these then nightly magazine shows contacted Lear, wanted to come out and interview him, and Lear mentioned Bill Cooper. And he said, oh boy, he's got a hell of a story about the JFK assassination. So they came out. Lear was interviewed. Then he's off to the side watching Cooper being interviewed. And Cooper began spinning this yarn about O.H. Krill. Okay? O.H. Krill. And oh, yes, he said, back in 1973, I read all about this in the Navy files. And suddenly, believe it or not, John Lear, his little light went on. And he's thinking, that's impossible, because John Grace and I just basically relayed that for the first time in his book, The Matrix. So, after the interview was over, Lear went up to Cooper and he said, Bill, what the hell are you doing? What do you mean? Bill, O.H. Krill. That didn't even exist until John Grace and I added it to the Matrix. And Cooper, as he was wont to do when challenged, went ballistic and began ranting and raving and screaming, God damn it, I read that in the Navy files. I don't care what you said. Well, that was the first major crack in the Lear Cooper story. Well, not much longer after that, Cooper broke the bond with John Lear, and then he began going after everybody, which was another part of his personality. He was heard saying on numerous occasions, if anybody attacks me, I'll crucify them. And he began putting out something called his CAJI, C-A-J-I, Citizens and Joint Intelligence, that's what it stood for, this newsletter, where he accused John Lear of being an active CIA agent. He accused Bob Lazar of being an active disinformant, and a bunch of other people, including George Knapp, all right? And this was the impetus that caused me to begin my investigation and ultimately two-part expose on Bill Cooper. But by that time, the UFO field was in a dozen different little coteries of people, and they were all fighting, sniping, and snapping at each other. And later, UFO historian Jerry Clark, following the 1989 MUFON International Symposium, began calling this the dark side of ufology emerges. Because, as I discovered, there were people out there convinced, and John Lear was one of them, that the aliens were, among other things, and he wrote about this extensively, utilizing human abductees to an extent as a food source, which sounds like something out of a grade Z science fiction potboiler, okay? But that was all part of the shtick. And
it's a cookbook, Twilight Zone.
Exactly. I'm telling you, dude. And I saw, and how I kept my mind, I couldn't begin to tell you. I've seen people go down this rabbit hole and come out with a total personality transplant.
Wow.
People have gone off the freaking edge.
There was a question that was in the chat. Now, I'm actually really curious about this. How'd that fucker survive your evisceration of him?
He denied it, all of it. He denied everything. Oh, and there was, before Art Bell, There was a radio broadcaster down in Vegas by the name of Billy Goodman.
Yeah,
And
you've
this
talked about
was-
him before.
This was before I began my radio show in 91. Okay. This was like 88, 89. And actually, it was the Bob Lazar story that put Billy Goodman on the map. Okay. Because at that time, you have no idea what a huge nuclear blast it was when George Knapp came out with the Bob Lazar story. Okay. Literally, news organizations all over the planet were contacting KLAS TV Channel 8 in Vegas, where Knapp worked, for the rights to run the Bob Lazar story. Because you gotta realize that since 1953, okay, and this was 88, 89, since 53, the government totally denied that they had anything out there where what today we know as Area 51 existed. Okay. There's nothing out there, right? Nothing out there. Well, of course there was. This was where the U-2 airplane was developed. This is where the A-12 was developed. The SR-71 was developed. All kinds of extraordinarily high-tech stuff. And now there were stories coming out that discs were flying out of Area 51, a la Bob Lazar, including video footage of these things flitting around the mountains. All right. And that, by the way, is another story. So anyway, Bob Lazar put Billy Goodman on the map, and Goodman became close buddies with Bill Cooper, because initially Cooper, and I've got the tape, one night called in. He had a bad flu or cold or something, but Cooper loved the media business, boy. He loved getting his face and his name and voice out there, lauding how Bob Lazar was the real deal. Him and John Lear and George Knapp, and I guess by inference, the Girl Scouts of America, all investigated Bob Lazar, and he was as true blue, okay, as the morning dew on the grass. And then a short time later, Lazar ended up being one of his public enemies, number one, and suddenly he turned on a dime, okay, because that's how Cooper would do it. Turn on a dime, and suddenly this guy was a scumbag. Well, when I did my expose, one night, I guess it was about 9:30, 10 o'clock, Vicky had already gone to bed. I was out in the kitchen doing something. I might have had a local radio station on, and the phone rang, which was very unusual at that time of night. So I answered it. And this guy that I knew at the time said, Don, are you listening to Billy Goodman? And I said, no, because Goodman was broadcasting out of well, no, by then, the Vegas radio station had fired him. And now he was on a network coming out of Utah. Okay. So I said, no, I'm not listening to him. He said, well, Bill Cooper is on there. And somebody asked him about the expose you did. And oh my God, he's tearing you and Vicky and UFO magazine up. So I went to the radio, found a station, was listening. And I said, oh, okay. So I had Goodman's number. I dug it out and I called up. His producer answered. And I said, producer, this is Don Ecker from UFO magazine. I said, I understand that my name and Vicky Cooper's name have been defamed on your radio show tonight. So this is your choice. Make it now. You can either tell Goodman that I'm here and to put me on the goddamn air, or tomorrow my attorneys will be getting in touch with you all at Goodman's radio station. Well, my God, 30 seconds later, I'm talking to fucking Billy Goodman. And he said, oh. And one thing about Goodman, okay, he had all the aspects of Art Bell being a showman, but he was an ass clown when it came to that. Okay? he didn't have Bell's panache. All right.
The word of the day: ass clown.
So they're getting ready to go to break. And he said, and now, ladies and gentlemen, I have a special announcement. Don Ecker from UFO Magazine called in and wants to confront Bill Cooper on the air right here on the Billy Goodman Happening. We'll be back after these remarks. So, you know.
I have a question. Were your first words, "You crazy cocksucker"?
No.
Oh my God.
No.
My
the
God.
FCC was still in charge.
Oh, the FCC, yeah.
But that's a little famous item from years past. But I'll tell you, this field has never been a place for snowflakes. All right.
Yeah.
And I learned a long time ago. You thought you were tough in the Army. Well, buddy, you better have some thick skin for this business. And as a matter of fact, somebody, who was it that asked? Was it Jeebus? Asked me if, down here on the screen, are you going to that thing in Pasadena? No. Like I said, I was not invited. And that's one thing about me. A lot of people are, I think, intimidated by my direct persona. Okay. I don't, as a rule, bullshit around. And if you ask,
there's nothing intimidating about you at all.
if somebody asks me for my opinion, I give it to you, and you may not like it, but hey, you asked for it, so there it is.
Yeah. I think that's why we're friends, because we both are straight shooters. We're very honest and just blunt. But I really do agree. There was a nice statement made by John Ostains, which is someone you know, right?
Yeah.
You know, John, right. He said that hope all know that Cooper, while a powerful speaker and Jim Jones type, which is interesting, was really a bad guy, which is a Jim Jones type. He's good at getting people to buy his bullshit. Ecker's expose should have ended Cooper, but he survived to birth Rents, Red, Ice, McVeigh, etc.
Oh, well, there's so much more I could have gone into on Cooper. And we still have, we still have, what, 10 minutes?
We have almost 15.
Yeah, Cooper at that point was still claiming the UFOs were real, the ETs were real, and he literally put together a petition to send to Congress, that is the Congress of the United States, to expose this secret alien treaty he maintained that the secret government, not the government, the secret government had formed with the aliens. Now, a short time later, as he melted down, he broke and burned all bridges with the UFO field. Everybody, okay, in the UFO field. And suddenly did one of those Bill Cooper turn on a dime, and it was all a government disinformation plot to, number one, do away with the U.S. Constitution. Number two, come in and confiscate all privately owned firearms. Number three, the IRS is illegal. They cannot take your money, blah, blah, blah. Okay. That whole shtick, which basically ended up leading to Cooper's death. He became a felon on the run, ultimately, with bank fraud and tax evasion charges. But the feds were afraid of being too aggressive going after him. And that was because of the Waco siege and the murder. And I said murder.
Yeah, it was
over 100 dead from that Branch Davidian compound.
Yeah, between Ruby Ridge and the Branch Davidians, the FBI has proven that they better be, because that should have been a local issue. There shouldn't have been any feds there. There was no need for feds.
No.
That was a local.
No, but who was in charge then?
Yeah, I know.
Who was in charge?
Had sexual relations with that.
And who was his attorney general? Look, I'm not going there.
Are you saying Janet Reno? Was it Janet Reno?
I'm not going there, because I'll say something. I'll say something that I shouldn't.
All I know is that the best Janet Reno I ever saw was Will Ferrell.
He ended up moving to Ecker, Arizona. He had been here in California, down in Southern Cal. He was living with a Chinese mail order bride. Now, look, out of self-preservation, I kept a close eye on this guy, because I truly believed, and there's so much more we just simply physically don't have the time to go into, because I still, to this day, I have a package like this of Bill Cooper crap, all right, that I put together especially when I did my radio exposés on that maniac. But
I love that little pause. That little pause.
He had a severe, and when I say severe, I am talking about down in the gutter alcohol abuse problem. Okay. Matter of fact, I got a story. I'm not going to go into it now. I may talk about it later. But he had.
Well, it sounds like we really need to do a show just on this Cooper fucker.
Yeah. Well, he had teamed up with a couple of very well-known Hollywood celebrities. One of them was Michael Callan, very well-known actor. By the way, he was in Cat Ballou with Jane Fonda, Lee Marvin, Michael Callan. And Callan's buddy, Dean, a real sweet guy. He was an older gentleman at the time. I am sure that he is now long gone. I haven't talked to them in 25 years. But Cooper had signed a contract with these guys because they were setting him up the Hollywood fashion, getting him speaking engagements where he was starting to make some serious money for public appearances. And he told them at the time, He told them at the time, and then they told me, that Cooper had said that he would drink a bottle of Chivas every other night just to keep himself grounded because of all the fear and pressure that he would be targeted by the secret government. Bullshit. The guy was an alcoholic, okay? That's why he was drinking all that. But
Yeah,
when
making
he
excuses.
did drink, he got mean. He literally got into fistfights at UFO. You know, as a matter of fact, got in a hell of a fight down in San Diego one time with well, this other guy was truly an ass hat anyway. And it was kind of funny, the two of them going to it. But, you know, hey, look, I was there. I saw it all. But he ended up abusing his Chinese mail order bride. And they had a little girl, okay? They had a little girl, and the lady, she was at that time going by the name Annie. Annie said, the hell with this, picked up, took her little girl, and I think they went back to Taiwan. All right. And left
I'm surprised
Cooper
you
high
didn't
and
pull the
dry.
Eddie Murphy thing, you know. Half. Take him for half.
If you knew this guy, you would know why. Okay.
He didn't have anything, did he?
Well, he had a gun.
Oh,
okay.
dangerous.
He had a gun. And that's what did him in. Down in Ecker, Arizona, in early November 2001. Remember, there are federal warrants out for this son of a bitch. But the thing that caused it all to come to a point was some guy had inadvertently driven onto Cooper's property. Now, who knows what was going through Cooper's mind, but he saw this car, and the car turned around and went left again. Cooper ran out, jumped in his vehicle with his gun, chased this guy down, forced him off the road, and then at gunpoint got this guy out of his car. Well, it turned out it was a local MD, a family doctor. And after he was able to get away from Cooper, he immediately went to the sheriff's department and reported this. Well, they decided to come out and bring this thing to a climax. So a couple of deputies in a pickup truck, one that night, I guess, or the next night, went roaring through his front yard in this truck. Cooper came running out of the house with his .45, okay? And the cops suddenly swarmed him, tried to take him under arrest. Cooper went back to his house. One deputy was on the porch. Cooper fired a shot, hit the guy in the head.
Ooh.
Okay? Hit the guy in the head. Didn't kill him.
Oh.
Didn't kill him, but fucked him up. And then the police returned fire and shot his ass off. And that was the end of Bill Cooper. So it was a tragic ending. Look, you know, and in many ways, it's kind of hard for me to go back through all this crap. But when I tell you that there's so much more to this story, take me at my word, there is. But we just physically don't have the time. But it's
well, yeah, because we're near the end of the show, and I really wanted to point out that we had some good comments here that I wanted to get to. Glenn Fleming is a good friend of ours. I've known him for a while. Did an amazing documentary about Jack Kirby. Love the guy. He said, I had a lengthy talk with Bill Cooper in London back in 1993. Interesting man. He also continues, I always thought Cooper was O&I. I don't know, but that's the impression I got. Talking. Now,
no.
O&I, so people know, is the Office of Naval Intelligence. And I don't think this guy had any involvement with the military or Department of Defense in any way.
Oh, he was in the Navy.
Yeah, but I don't think he was in any of the intelligence. I don't think he had anything to do with the Department of Defense with intelligence. He just sounds like a complete whack job, just a complete crazy fucker. And finding out that he's an alcoholic is just par for the course. I'm not saying that crazy people are alcoholics, and I'm not saying all alcoholics are crazy people, but I'm saying some of them are. I think there's a correlation somewhere. Anyway. Also, John Ostein's got some great comments, and I actually wrote a note down of this, John. I really do. I like to do a whole show about the 1989 LV MUFON show and get into the nuts and bolts of what happened there, and especially with your perspective on it, Don. John also says, if you do a BC show, Gary, play some of the telephone messages Cooper left to harass others. Super creepy. I'd like to know how to get a hold of those. Maybe you got them. You got them? Outstanding. John O'Sain also continues, says, wait until you hear the end of this get off my lawn story, monkey, which he's talking about when he took a shot at the cop, hit him in the head. So what happened to that cop? Do you know?
Well, it's been years. Remember, this is 22 years ago. All right. 22 years ago.
Almost the same age as my daughter.
Yeah. I tried to track down a number of years back what basically his condition was. To the best of my knowledge, he survived, but he had been, as a matter of fact, he had been a Marine, okay, in Desert Storm, and was married with several children. What he's doing today, I don't even know if he's still alive.
I'd like to look up and find out what happened to him. God bless him, man. We support our men in blue, women, and because there are a lot of women out there, gutsy broads that are tough cops, man, good cops. There's always going to be 1% of any group that's fucking assholes. We know that. Stop making them all sound like it, and stop making TV shows apologizing for that 1%. You know, because I stopped watching SWAT because of that shit. I was watching the show, enjoying it, and then they did that episode where, you know, the main character from Criminal Minds apologizes. Well, I'm not one of those cops. Well, 99% of the cops aren't. You know, fuck you. Fuck Hollywood. We support our men and women.
By the way, my wife is still amazed. She said, where do you keep that stuff? But yet you forget to take out the garbage.
Well, you all know where I keep my information. That's right, in my back door. John, I'm going to go ahead. I want to show that video now because I only saw this recently. Anima, same thing. It's like there's nothing worse than woke garbage. This is the video of the. Okay, we can stop it now, buddy. I know I'm aware of the time. Thank you, buddy. Thank you. I mean it, Martin. You're on it today. I like that. Go ahead, hit play, buddy. This is the famous Zapruder film that was motion controlled to where it was stabilized. And they did it in 4K cleanup. It's still, you can tell it's 8mm because everything's kind of muddy. There he's hit as he comes out from behind the sign. Oh, great. Our logo is. Pause it for a second. God damn it. There. Go back. Yep. Do it again. There we go. Thanks, John. And you can still see something there. And I don't know if that's a hat or what the fuck that was, or a gun. I don't know. I have my doubts. I think it was the passenger's head.
It was the shine off the Secret Service agent passenger's head.
That's what it looked like to me.
Brill cream. Remember?
Goddamn Brill cream back in the 50s and 60s. Yeah, buddy. I remember my dad bought me some of that when I was a kid. My head felt like I was wearing a plastic hat.
Yeah.
Great show today. Man, that was a lot of stuff to unpack today. Great show. I appreciate it, Dawn. Everybody, I hope you guys appreciated all this information. I hope your heads are swimming a little bit, because if your heads aren't swimming right now, then you are Monkey Jeebus. Baby Jackie O'Shawn, fuck you, monkey. I swear to God. There will be a quick after show. I don't know how long it'll last, because we need.
By the way, there will be a quiz. You will be expected to get at least 7 out of 10, or you're going to get an F for the day.
Yep. Monkey, I hope you studied. I hope you crammed. All right. So let's wrap this shit up. Thanks, guys. We will see you this afternoon with Dangerous Military Nerds. A friend of mine is going to join Don and I, Shane Moore. John, you know him too. You're friends with him too. We love Shane Moore. He's a great guy. It's going to be great to have him finally on. I'm so looking forward to introducing you to, because it's either going to be amazing or fucking you're going to go at it. I don't know what's going to happen. I love it. I love it. Anyway, I hope you guys join. And until then, see you next Wednesday. Same bat time. Same bat channel.
Hey guys, thanks for watching Pop Culture Minefield. If you've enjoyed the show, please make sure to like, subscribe, and don't forget to click the bell icon for updates on our shows and channel. Also, please leave a comment, and we'd like to know what you thought of the episode, as well as letting us know if there's something you'd like us to cover in a future episode. Don't forget that you can become a member of Pop Culture Minefield now. Make sure to visit our membership page and merch store at popcultureminefield.com. You can always find Pop Culture Minefield on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitch.